So we did a project on gangs and how young people are kind of attracted to gangs. So why people choose to join a gang. And we did some interviews with some former gang members as well.
Astrid-Marie Jensen is a master's student studying criminology in Denmark. She is currently working on her thesis looking at how parents can prevent their children from joining a gang. Today, we are sitting down to discuss the intricacies around crime and punishment and answer some of the field's most challenging questions.
You don't just wake up one day and watch a music video and then you're like, oh, I want to join a gang. Usually it's kind of like gradually. So you get involved with some people who are also involved with the gang, and then you kind of just get drawn into it, because then you experience what it's like to have money, and maybe someone tells you, oh, if you just deliver this package, then I'll give you some money. Or if you just look out for cars or cops or whatever, then I'll give you some money. Yeah. So the social bond theory is about why people don't commit crime. So it's about how strong social bonds to society, parents, school, jobs, everything like that prevents you from committing crimes because you have too much to lose. So in Denmark, we kind of say that the only punishment is that you get your freedom taken away. So everything else should be quite normal.
What do you think like an ideal sort of system would look like?
It's a difficult question. It's a tricky question. And it's also about my personal views on punishment as well, because it is quite this like philosophical question. How much do we need to punish?
Okay, so thank you, Estelle, for joining me today. I just want to get started by giving me a sense of how you got into criminology. I know you did your undergrad in anthropology. Do you think that those two are some sort of related? Like, do you think it was a natural sort of journey for you to get into criminology?
Yeah, I do think so. Like, I took a course in what's called restorative justice while doing my social anthropology bachelor's. And it was about how we punish as a society and whether or not it's the best way of kind of restoring justice, as the name is. So I think that got me really interested in the field of criminology. And then I just, yeah, decided to apply for a master's degree in criminology and see if that was for me. And turns out it was. So,
And how
yeah.
does it work? Like when you do choose criminology, because I feel like that's quite a broad degree, do you choose sort of what field you're interested in criminology?
No, so the thing is, in Denmark, there is only one university that has the master's degree in criminology, and we do not have a bachelor's degree in criminology. So what you do is you apply, and then there are like, I think 40 people that get accepted into criminology master's degree. And then it's kind of like a broad variety of theories and topics that you get taught. And then you do these like bigger projects where you kind of zoom in on something that you find interesting, and then you do some research yourself as well. So that's how it works in Denmark.
Okay, very cool. And you mentioned to me before we started like about your master's thesis. Like, do you want to tell me about like what that encompasses, like what you're doing a master's thesis on, and sort of why you got interested in that?
Yeah, definitely. So I think to tell you how and why I'm interested in it, I'll start with my first project. So we did a project on gangs and how young people are kind of attracted to gangs, if you can say so. So why people choose to join a gang. And we did some interviews with some former gang members as well. And then when I had to choose my master's thesis, I wanted to do something different. So I wanted to look at how gangs impact society around them. So we chose parents as kind of our main topic. And then we are looking into how it affects parents when they have to raise their children in a neighborhood where there's also a gang. So we've chosen a specific neighborhood in a Danish city. And then there is this local gang that is known in the area and also has its name after the area. So we are speaking to parents in this area trying to figure out like how do you raise your children when the gang is such an active part of community.
Yeah, yeah, that's really interesting because, like, you talk about your first project with like how young people or like people were kind of enticed into like joining the gang, like why people join a gang. Like my first thoughts would be, the rise of like with rap culture. I feel like it's more glamorized that sort of lifestyle of, like sort of I don't know how to describe it, like dealing drugs and then also you kind of have the clothes you see. I remember even 3 years ago when I first started going to Denmark, you wouldn't really see like a typical London roadman, I'd say, would wear like a full like tracksuit. And you wouldn't really see that in Denmark. Like when I first started going, I wouldn't really see it as much. But I feel like with the rise of people like Central C, now when I go to Denmark, you see more young people wearing what I would see in London. Do you think like what did you see from that project as why like gangs were glamorized and why people wanted to join a gang?
Yeah, so I do feel like one of the main reason is like a sense of community and a sense of brotherhood. And also like Danish research shows that as well. So that's what we kind of found out as well. But I feel definitely that like rap music plays a role in that because it's a way of portraying this brotherhood and it's a way of portraying a certain lifestyle with, yeah, as you said, money, drugs, stuff
Mm.
like that. But it does play a part, but I don't think it's like the main reasons. I think some of the main reasons is like having or like longing for a community, and maybe your parents are kind of not really there and you don't have any other place to go, and you've been brought up in a area where you're kind of like economically and socially deprived as well. So you're longing for the sense of belonging, if you can say that. I think that's a really important factor when speaking about gangs, especially for young people, because you don't just wake up one day and watch a music video and then you're like, oh, I want to join a gang.
Mm.
Usually it's kind of like gradually. So you get involved with some people who are also involved with the gang, and then you kind of just get drawn into it because then you experience what it's like to have money, and maybe someone tells you, oh, if you just deliver this package then I'll give you some money, or if you just look out for cars or cops or whatever, then I'll give you some money. And
Mm.
if you're 14 years old and you don't have any money and your parents don't have any money, then obviously that's going to be tempting. uh, and there's also the fact that when you're 14 years old, you don't really think about consequences either. So you're just like, oh, money, that's cool, you know.
Mm.
And then you kind of get lured into it as well.
And do you think like a poverty is another factor? Because I imagine if like you see your parents quite struggling and there's not many opportunities for jobs in an area, then you'd be more likely to, if you saw your peers or people you went to school with like selling drugs and making a lot of money, then that would be sort of that it'd be enticing to join that and sort of make money as well if you didn't see any other ways to get money.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. But I do feel like there's also quite a big difference in what kind of society you're in, because I do believe that like the poverty factor is probably more uh, predominant, is that a word?
Yeah, yeah.
It's, yeah, predominant in like the UK or the United States, whereas in Denmark we do have a different like social structure to society. So poverty definitely is a factor here as well, but not as much because
Mm.
we have kind of like good welfare as well. So yeah, but I do think it is a factor. I do think combined with different things. So combined with the sense of belonging, the sense of not having what everyone else has, and then maybe also some discriminating or stigmatizing behavior from the outside world that makes you feel even less connected to the world around you. And then we all want to belong somewhere. And then if the gang is the only place that you belong, then you kind of get drawn into that as well. So yeah, definitely a factor, but I wouldn't say like the biggest one. And Danish research also shows that it is a factor, but not, you can't really say it's the factor, if that makes sense.
Mm.
So yeah,
Yeah, that makes
but
sense.
that,
Because I was just going to say, like, I was almost surprised that there was. I mean, it makes sense there'd be gangs everywhere, but it's almost like surprising in Denmark because you have such high taxes, and then therefore you also have a really good like welfare state. And for me, for some, I just kind of thought that the driving factor would be poverty for sort of gangs because in London, where you have a lot of these gangs, would be in sort of like council estates where you've got like blocks of flats and not many jobs and not a lot of money, and people are struggling. And I always just thought that it was that would sort of be why people would turn to gangs is sort of to make money. But I think what you're saying about that sort of community feeling, it makes a lot of sense because um, there's also probably a sense of like loyalty there, like they protect each other and take care of each other. And if as well, if we're looking at young children who a lot of I imagine in America as well, like in the UK, when you have a lot of single mums, like when you have a single mum, a lot of these children, their parents mum might be always working, so there wouldn't be anyone at home, so then they're sort of like looking elsewhere. Do you think that that is a factor you found in like with research that like being a single parent or perhaps from I don't know how would it what would it look like? What would increase the risk of a young person joining a gang? Would it be being from like a working class family or like an immigrant family, for example? Like what are those factors that increase a risk of a child joining a gang?
yeah, so definitely what you see in Denmark. And I also want to just state that sometimes when speaking about gangs, you also have to remember the context. So maybe the problem in Denmark is not as big as it is somewhere else. Like obviously we do have gangs and we do have gang conflicts and stuff like that, but it's not like you can't walk as a normal person in these areas. Like there are areas in, I guess, UK and the States as well, and probably somewhere else where you just can't walk and you don't feel safe. Like I feel safe when I'm in this area that I'm doing my research in. I just
Mm,
want to say that firstly.
yeah.
Yeah. And then yeah, definitely single parent households, and that's often single mothers, but it can be both, because the parents do have to work a lot and can't really um, look out for their children in the same way that you're able to if you are two parents household. And then yeah, so uh, working class, kind of uneducated families as well, undereducated, maybe like shorter education is also a factor, and drinking problems, drugs obviously, violence as well is a factor. And yeah, and then we do also see how like immigration also plays a part, but I would say that it's more like the fact that these young boys, it's boys, only boys are members, or men are members of gangs in Denmark. But so I'm going to refer to them as men or boys.
Yeah.
Young boys that feel left out of mainstream society because of their appearance. So their ethnic characteristic draws them to groups with someone who looks like them because they have a harder time finding a job because of their name or the color of their skin. And they feel like every time they try to engage in mainstream society, they
Mm.
are getting pushed out because of the way they look. Um, and they
And
are
do you think
getting,
a factor then
sorry?
in Denmark? Is that a factor in Denmark? Would you say?
Yeah,
Like,
definitely, definitely.
mm. I'm
So I,
like I'm just surprised a little bit because I think do you think it's any country that has a predominantly white population and then and then an immigrant population sees that some sort of like not feeling accepted, um, or yeah,
yeah, I do think that's kind of, I don't know, but we all do this. Like we all use stereotypes and we all, in some sort, stigmatize people that do not remind us of ourselves.
mm,
So I also do feel like it's quite natural, but as a society, when we do it, it has a really big like consequences. And I do think the thing about Denmark is we're not always very good at talking about it. We're not very, so Danish people, obviously,
yeah,
and we like to be comfortable, and we don't like confrontation. So every time someone brings up words like racism or discriminating behavior or equality, most people kind of back off that conversation
Mm.
because it's uncomfortable to speak about. But truth is, we do see like racist behavior, we do see stigmatizing behavior, and it is a factor when speaking about why young people choose to join gangs or get
Mm.
drawn to gangs as well.
Yeah, I think as well, like when you look at, I think when you have immigration, there naturally becomes a culture clash if the societies are really different. So like even coming from the UK to Denmark, like looking at the difference, I would say that, you know, in Denmark, people don't really small talk or like stuff like that. Like in the UK, you know, you just randomly start up a conversation with like a cashier or something, or like just you know just say random things about having a day, and then they'll just talk back about it, like things like that. Yeah, and but you don't really get that at all in Denmark, and I think if we're looking at the majority of the immigrant population that probably go to Denmark, it'd be people from the Middle East, and I'd say they're people that also like similar to UK, where like they pop like start up like small talk and stuff like that. And when I first went to Denmark, I you know it felt a bit weird because I'd try and start small talk with Danish people, and they'd kind of just ignore it. Like you know, I'd be in the supermarket and I'd say like I'd be buying sweets or something, and I'd say to the cashier, I'd be like, "Oh, God, the sweets in Denmark are so expensive," and he'd just look at me, like just like nod and then just scan it through. Whereas if that was in the UK, like we would have had a whole little conversation for like a minute there, and it kind of feels like oh, you just ignored in a way. So I imagine, yeah, that could be another factor of like immigrants moving there and feeling like oh, the culture's different and maybe not feeling accepted. Whereas that's just a difference in, you know, just the way people communicate. It's just a different culture.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. But I do feel like also the problem in Denmark is that we do have a lot of media focus on gangs. So we kind of think it's this huge problem, and all immigrant children are joining gangs, they're violent, more and more people are joining gangs, where in fact the picture is quite opposite. So crime in Denmark is on like an all-time low. I wouldn't say all-time because I don't know like the statistics, but it's not rising. You know, we have and people more and more people are going into education, getting jobs, stuff like that. So it's also about how we portrayed as a society, and then because if we as a society believe that all men with from the Middle East who are mostly born here actually, but all men with these ethnic characteristics, we all believe, oh, they're gang members. And every time we speak to them or see one, we look at them differently, we treat them differently, then they're gonna feel that because we all feel that. Just like you said, you're like in the supermarket speaking to the cashier, and you like felt okay, I'm different. I'm definitely different.
Yeah.
And it's not she's not rude, but you're just different, you know. And then you are gonna feel like you're left out, like you don't belong. And I feel like that sense of belonging is key when speaking about why young people join gangs in
Mm.
Denmark, at least. Yeah.
So you mentioned the media sort of, you know, making this problem that perhaps isn't as big of a problem. Why do you think the media are doing that in Denmark?
I don't think it's just in Denmark. I know that media all over the world, you know, we see how clickbait and headlines and yellow signs and everything, whenever you scroll on social media, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, whatever, that's all you see because that's how you make money. And I
Mm.
think we just need to also be aware that whenever the media are doing a story, obviously they are trying to highlight something that's wrong with society, but it's also a way of making money and it's people's jobs. And I feel like we just need to be aware of that because there is so much information online
Mm.
and you can get access to it so easily, and people are making a lot of money out of it as well. So money and power, it's kind of like all intertwined.
Yeah.
And it does make sense, but it's just a part of a capitalistic society as well, that that's how it works. So
Yeah.
yeah, I do think that's it.
And sort of going back to gangs in your thesis, you also looked at how like families and parents are trying to stop their children from getting involved with gangs. What did you find that the main ways that parents were sort of doing that?
Yeah, so some of the main ways was definitely communication, but also surveillance. And a lot of American research shows this as well. So that kind of backs up our empirical finds. But what we did was we asked the parents, what do you do in order to make sure that your children don't get in contact with the gang? And they would like call them and make sure they always knew where they were. They had different times they had to be home, and they would try to communicate with them, ask them, where have you been? And also they would say that they couldn't go out in like large groups, and they had to, if they were to go out with friends, the friends had to come pick them up. And she would like, one mother in particular was like, I need to approve of the friends as well.
Mm.
And looking at it from a more like criminological kind of standpoint, there is this theory around social bond. And it's, how to explain it? It's like simply explained, it's the fact that parents or anyone else, okay, I'm just gonna start over.
Yeah, that's okay. That's
So
okay.
yeah. So the social bond theory is about why people don't commit crime. So
Mm.
it's about how strong social bonds to society, parents, school, jobs, everything like that prevents you from committing crimes because you have too much to lose.
Mm.
And we saw in our study how the parents were trying to strengthen the children's social bonds to society. So they were trying to help them get a job. They were trying to make sure that they weren't around people who committed crimes or had like other deviant behavior. And they would uh, like make them change schools as well. So they didn't go to the local school, and some of the parents didn't have the means to, but also wanted to move out of the area completely in order to kind of like protect the social bonds that the children were um, making to the rest of society. Yeah.
I think the idea of social bonds is so like interesting because it's one of the reasons why I always sort of thought we had religion because when let's say you'll go back to that hunter gatherer time, you're like in a small village, maybe like 100 people or something, you would know a lot of people in that village. There would be a strong sense of community. So then, therefore, if you wanted to commit a crime, that I feel like you were held more accountable, and also because of those social bonds to that community, you'd feel so strongly towards them. You wouldn't want to do something bad. But then, as people started moving into cities and the population became so big, and you had less of those social ties to the community you live in, I felt that religion people would commit more crimes because they felt less of that bond, and then so therefore religion sort of like the stronger you had a religion in society, the more people would feel that sort of sense of community and that bond. And then they'd also feel that sort of God was watching them all the time. And then if they committed any sort of crime, even if the government and society wouldn't hold them accountable, then God would. So I used to think that was sort of like a reason why you might have religion in society, was sort of like to make sure that people don't commit crimes or punishment, and also maintain that sort of social bonds. Did your research look at all at how religion, or if young people might have be religious, and if that might have any effects on if they join a gang? Like, would you see at all any sort of crossover there?
Nah, I don't really, I haven't really looked at it, so I can't really speak about that much. But we did speak to informants with different religions. And I do feel like religion played some sort of role, like some of the Muslim mothers that we spoke to really also talked about praying for their children as well, and really trying to turn them into like these good religious citizens, but also I feel like, so whatever that bond is, it doesn't really matter that much. So I think you're right when you're saying that we don't have that sort of mm, how did you phrase it, but like of belonging, and we don't really depend on each other anymore in the way that we used to do in these small societies. So that's why you wouldn't commit the same crimes at least. Whereas now we are less dependable and we don't really have strong social ties to society, and that's why we maybe commit more crime. So I do like the way that you are thinking about it. I do think that's definitely has some truth to it.
Mm. And those sort of strategies that you highlighted that parents or mothers would use to try and stop their kids joining the gangs, you mentioned like calling their children and make sure that they only went out if the friend picked them up and that sort of things. I find it hard. How effective do you think it is? Because to me, when you say it like that, it sounds almost a bit controlling. Like, some of the kids, or they're not kids, but people I met at university, the ones that like had really strict parents that would do things like sort of what you're highlighting there. With I felt like they always rebelled really hard when they went to uni, more so than kids that were
Hmm.
actually given that freedom. Um, so yeah, how effective do you think that those strategies were that the parents were using?
Yeah, so it definitely is like a really fine line, because there are like Danish research that shows that like surveillance can also have the opposite effect and just create young people that lies to their parents and stuff. There is not much research on this topic, so it's hard to say exactly, but there are some American studies that show that when you use both surveillance and communication and take an interest. So they use like parental warmth as this kind of to explain the communication part. So it's about verbal communication instead of physical punishment, and it's about taking an interest in your child where they are, explaining to them, taking the time to explain like, this is why I'm calling you. I'm calling you because I'm scared that you are going to get involved with something. So it is a fine line, but the American research shows that if you use both, it will have a positive effect. But in areas where crime is overwhelming and like opportunities of crime is overwhelming, it will have less effect. So it also depends on the neighborhood structure as well.
Hmm. I think I'm just imagining. Obviously, I don't have a kid, so I can't really say
Yeah.
I would. But I'm trying to imagine how I would handle it because, I don't know how much would you say to a kid? Like, would you tell them what a gang was and what they sort of might want you to? Because I feel like a gang when they're trying to get a kid into the gang, it's for things as you mentioned before. It's like maybe getting a backpack and taking it somewhere, or like standing on a street corner and calling if there's police coming. Like it's very small things that a young person might not understand the consequence of or why they're even doing it. So would as a parent telling them what's going on with that and like why they shouldn't do it, do you think that would be an effective strategy to implement?
I do think when growing up in a neighborhood where a gang is present, and where like, so the thing in the neighborhood that we're researching is the neighborhood has the same name as the gang,
Mm.
and everyone knows this. It's like it's a local gang, but everyone in the city of Aalborg, where I live and study, knows what this is. And I do believe if you live in that area, even though you're a kid, you're like 13, 14, 15, maybe even 12, you would know that the gang exists. So I do think it's effective to actually speak to your children as part of like the communication surveillance, because then you can explain to them, oh, when this guy is asking you to look out and is willing to give you money, then that is gang activity. you know
Yeah.
and I think you should definitely tell your children that, in order to prevent them from joining their gangs, because
Um,
as you said, otherwise they'll just kind of get lured into it because they're not quite sure what they're doing.
Yeah, and they just see it as like, oh, just a bit of money. Like, there's not that bad to do this.
Yeah, and also the friendship in it. So like they will be like, "Oh, but he's my friend. So I'm gonna do this because he's my friend." And we all know this. If our friends ask something of us, we want to do it because we want to be a good friend.
Mm.
So it's also that balance of wanting to be a good friend, and then sometimes money is involved as well. And yeah, and also if you don't have any role models, then the older members of the gangs with the nice cars and all the money, and they'll also become role models for these young children. So it's kind of the combining factor of all these different things that kind of makes it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. So when we think about prevention, um, how would you go about what stage of prevention would you use to stop children joining a gangs? Like once a child has joined a gang, is there even a way to sort of prevent it at that point, or do you have to do it prevention before they've even got into the gang itself?
So I do think there are two different types of prevention because I think you can always try to prevent or at least re-socialize someone who's committed crime into society. So I won't say that it's ever too late to do so. It's just different strategies used. So I do believe if you want to prevent that young people join gangs, you just as I explained how the parents try to maintain strong social bonds to society, as a society, I believe that's a really effective thing to do as well. Obviously, all prevention strategies are complex and have to take like the context into situation as well. So it can be individual as well, but I do believe making sure that young people are a part of a strong community, they're doing well in school, and if they're not, then you should help them so they can do well, and making sure that they have places to be after school. It can be like clubs, like youth clubs. I don't know if you have the same thing, but we
Yeah.
do in Denmark. We have these like youth clubs where young people can come and there will be like social workers and stuff to look after them. It can be joining the local football team or handball team or whatever. So
Mm.
just really ensuring these like strong bonds to society and also helping parents. So if you do have single parent households, then making sure that the parents have the needs to look after their children because it is also expensive having five children as a single mother, and if they all want to go join the local football club, then that costs money as well. So economically supporting these parents would be a good idea as I see it.
Mm.
And then on the other hand, with the people that have already joined the gang, it's kind of also the same factors. So trying to get them to get a regular job, helping them get into society and kind of form these strong bonds once again. But it's also about actually acknowledging the fact that most people don't want to be in a gang forever. So
Yeah.
usually when you turn like 25, 26, 27, you actually do want to get out. So
Mm.
you want to have a normal life, you want to have a job, you want to not go to prison every once in a while, and being able to create a family as well. That's what most people long for. But the tricky part here is once you have a criminal record, it's harder to get a job, and probably also harder to find a girlfriend or whatever. So you got to help these people reintegrate into society, and you got to help them get a job or get an education, or maybe some of them also need some sort of like psychological treatment, because that's a different part that we hadn't touched on at all, and I don't know too much about it. But also these people, some of them have had like past traumas or have like diagnosis like ADHD or maybe autism even. So that's definitely also part of it, making sure that they get the right treatment as well.
Mm. Yeah, I think as well, like you touched on how if someone has a criminal record, then it might be harder for them to get a job or and this sort of things. And there's, I suppose, from that you could imply that there's sort of a stigma in society on people that have been involved with that sort of world. Uh, you know, when you think about punishment and going to prison, do you think that the idea of prison should be that once someone has gone, they have served their punishment, and that there shouldn't be stigmas after they leave? Like what in an ideal world, right? What would the prison system look like? And sort of, because I know obviously it's very complicated, and there's a lot of elements here with punishment and justice and rehabilitation. But what do you think like an ideal sort of system would look like?
Um,
It's a very
this
difficult
is
one.
it's a difficult question. It's a tricky question, and it's also about my personal views on punishment as well, because it is quite this like philosophical question: how much do we need to punish? Because just comparing Denmark to the States, where you have these like really long prison sentences, you can get sentenced to prison for 200 years or whatever. We don't have that here in Denmark. So that definitely does affect my view as well. I do believe that as a society, we should kind of acknowledge the fact that prison can serve some sort of like social justice. So you do something wrong, and then we take your freedom for a certain amount of time in order to kind of like right the wrongs. But I do also believe that this is more a way of implementing justice in society, like that feeling of justice once someone gets sentenced. And we should acknowledge that it doesn't help. Like we're not solving the problem. I think the statistics in Denmark is that 2 out of 3 people who go to prison will reoffend and get a sentence, another sentence. So I do believe that there should be different strategies in order to prevent crime from happening again. So I spoke a bit about restorative justice. So the key principles with restorative justice is restoring justice. So it's about changing the power dynamics between the victims and the offender in order to kind of restore what's been broken because of the crime committed. So we do use it in Denmark, and we also, especially in Norway, they're quite good at using this. So it's kind of like these mediation meetings where the offender and the victim will meet each other, and they'll
Wow.
be able, yeah, they'll be like a mediator. So they'll be able to speak to each other and maybe kind of restore the power dynamic. And obviously, these are effectful for some cases because you got to have an offender that actually feels empathy. So if you have like a straight up like sociopath, psychopath, whatever, it's not going to work. But if you have kind of, I want to say, a normal human being, then they will also feel a sense of regret once they sit next to the victim.
Mm.
So, and sometimes I think the offender doesn't even realize the impact they've had. So let's say I'm walking down the street and someone kind of passes me up and would be like, give me your phone, hand me your phone, hand me your money, just nothing else, but just that. As a victim, I'll be very affected by that. Maybe I will be scared to walk out my door and stuff like that. I can't sleep in my own apartment because I can't sleep alone because I'm scared someone will break into my apartment. All these psychological things. And by meeting the offender, I'm just making up this scenario, but if
Yeah.
I meet my offender, I'll be able to ask him, why me? And he'll probably just say, because you're the first person I saw. And you were the first person that I could easily overpower in a physical fight. You
Yeah.
know, so being able to actually hear that, and then also for the offender being able to realize the impact that he has done for a random act, I do believe that is quite powerful, and also is a form of punishment, having to actually realize what you've done. And speaking of like Western what do you call them, like systems as well, we tend to kind of leave the victim out of it, especially in Denmark. So once a crime is committed, the police will, or the police, yeah, the police will represent the victim, and the victim is just left out of it. So at least in cases where the victim is still alive, this could be quite effective, I believe.
Yeah, I think that's like super interesting. Even thinking about the victim and the offender being together and discussing it, because I just feel like that would be so incredibly powerful of a thing to do.
Yeah,
As the offender, they would just. I think there's always that element of just denial, probably that they're doing anything wrong, because no one wants to believe that their actions they're doing is causing harm, like as a normal person. Um,
mm,
because just humans aren't made to be like that. We're made to want to take care of society and be kind, and that's you feel
mm,
good for doing those things. So when you do a bad act, I think you sort of turn off or deny that it's having any impact. I think that there would be feelings of, oh well, they have money or insurance to get these things back. They're rich. They don't need it. All these sorts of things to feel like their bad action has not affected the person. But
yeah,
as you said, like bringing those people together and acknowledging that all the effects that they've had, and that person telling it, that would be, you know, just I thought that would be a wake up call, big like such a wake up call for that offender, um, and an amazing thing. I think there is this sort of challenge with different societies, because I think in Denmark, in where you've got a lot of money and a small population, so it's almost like these things are more realistic. I do think it is perhaps a different. It's difficult to implement a lot of the things that are in Denmark, in the UK, for example. I mean, the other thing which is quite interesting which Denmark does is like the open prisons. Um, like, do you want to talk a little bit about the open prisons? Because I think, like, my understanding of them at least is that you have like a typical prison, you have fences around, you're not allowed to leave. But an open prison is you're allowed to leave sometimes, and like yeah, so
yeah. So I'm aware that it's going to sound like a bit of a joke to some people because everyone is like, what are you on about? But yeah, so we do have like an open prison, so you can walk around freely, and you're not allowed to leave, but you can get like leaves, so you can be allowed to, let's say, go somewhere for something. You have to obviously you have to apply for it, but you're allowed to maybe go home and be there for your brother's wedding or stuff like that, and then you just have to come back. And I do believe that's also kind of a part of reintegrating people into society, because it also makes it possible to have a job. So the person will have some arrangements with different companies, and then the people who are in prison, they can go out for a job, and then they'll be returned back to prison. And then they don't make a lot of money. Like, they don't make money in the sense that everyone else in society is making money, but they're able to keep a job. And the same with school. So you can go to school. Obviously, we also have like educational things in place in prisons, but able to go to school, come back, stuff like that. Yeah.
yeah, because I saw the other day, there's been those like forest fires in Hollywood, like in that sort of area, that prisons were using inmates to put out the fires. Like they paid like $1 a day to go out there, and they would have
Yeah.
fire gear and stuff like that. And then that they'd be working on there like for 6 months. They'd be putting out all these fires and doing that. But in a way, like I watched this whole documentary about it, and it felt like the inmates that were doing it, they felt such a sense of like pride that they were actually doing something that was benefiting society. And then they also felt this sense of like community with all the other firefighters. They actually, that idea that we were talking about, sort of like building the social bonds, it was doing such a good job of that. So yeah, perhaps like using inmates or giving inmates jobs that to build those social bonds would be like a great direction to sort of make sure that inmates don't or rehabilitate well and don't reoffend.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I do think that's really an important part of it. So in Denmark, we kind of say that the only punishment is that you get your freedom taken away. So everything else should be quite normal in a sense. Obviously, you're in a prison, but you should be able to do your laundry. You should be able to cook your food. You should be able to speak to your parents on the phone. You should be able to get visitors, go to school, have a job, whatever. So they should be able to maintain everyday life just on the perimeters of the prison, if that makes sense. So you don't want them to suffer even more, because going to prison, having your freedom taken away is enough. Is kind of the thinking behind it, so to speak.
Yeah. I'm going to pose this to you because I feel like it's something that people would say as a rebuttal to our conversation. People would say they'd look at individuals that might be like rapists or murderers or people that have committed like the severest of crimes in society that you can do, and they would say, why should these people be allowed these rights? Just taking their freedom away isn't enough. They've done something so bad that why should they be allowed to just live a normal life still? What would you respond to people that might say something like that?
Yeah, so it's something I get quite a lot, and I have a couple of different answers to it
Yeah.
because I'm used to speaking about this. So first of all, I just feel the need to say that this is such a small percentage of the people in prison. So we're not speaking about a lot of people, and I feel like we should do what is best for those people as a whole. And then if we have some really extremely dangerous individuals, then we need to deal with them individually, and we do that in the Danish prison system. So obviously, like you can anywhere else, you can get an isolation and you can get in some rights taken away if you misbehave, stuff like that. That's how we deal with those people who are extremely dangerous, and they will probably never get out anyway. So that's kind of my first answer to the question. And then the second answer is, I do believe these people have shown signs of a deviance before they committed this act. So as a society as a whole, we should be way better at handling this early on. And it's the same with gang members. It's not this complete shock, oh wow, you're just a gang member now. Because no one wakes up one morning and decide, or at least not very many people wake up one morning and decide, I just want to be a murderer today, or I just want to rape someone today. Mostly these people also have a psychological condition of some sort. And that's why they do what they do. So I feel like being able to treat those people as well, and it's so hard to speak about because it's the worst thing anyone can imagine, especially imagining it happened to like a child or something like that. But truth is that we got to speak about it because most people that abuse children have been abused themselves as a child. So we do know this, and we do know that there are some signs to look out for in these people, but it's so difficult to speak about. And I think being able to actually speak about it and prevent it from happening rather than just punishing for 100 years or an eternity,
Yeah.
because it's not the solution, because we see that in the States, like they do punish people very heavily, but they haven't solved the problem. They still have serial killers, rapists, you know. And I do feel like we need to speak about solving the problem, because these people, obviously there is something wrong with them as well. And yeah, it's hard to speak about because it's such a fine balance between acknowledging the victim and their victims as well, because they have been hurt. And it's not that I'm not trying to say that what they've done is right. I'm just trying to say that usually in most cases we can actually kind of explain what has happened, and we need to look into that explanation in order to solve the problem as a society.
I think it's a good answer to the question because it is so true that the people that do these extreme crimes are the such small minority. And then when you have the larger minority, majority that are the ones that go into prison, are the ones that are in the gangs, keep reoffending, those are the main ones that, if you want to see a significant improvement to society, that's the portion that you want to help out. So I think that is a good point. Um, do you think that biases come into play here a lot? Because like, when I think about, I think you could probably make that point to a lot of people about this majority and minority, but I still think a lot of people would just feel so strongly about that people should be punished, that they wouldn't agree, even if you like put out the logic to them. Um, do you think that's because of like innate biases that people have, and how would you go about like solving these biases that humans have?
I feel like it's also a question about social structure and dynamics as well, because I do believe that maybe in some other places that I don't know about, this is not how we speak about justice. Like, justice is such a broad thing, you can't really define it. So we need to try to be nuanced in the way that we speak about justice, because the last maybe 10, 20 years, justice has been this thing just connected to punishment.
Mm.
And it's like when you go to prison, justice is served. But truth is, even the victim sometimes feels left out. Like they feel like they've been forgotten in the entire justice system process because they are not included. Like once the offender is behind bars, the victim is just left to deal with everything for themselves, and it doesn't go away. Like if you have been molested or you've been a victim of rape, then it doesn't go away. So maybe having a broader focus on justice as being, yeah, like I said, restoring justice as a process that actually takes time and is more than just putting people behind bars. I think that could be really productive
Mm.
for society as a whole and for different societies, not just the Danish one. But obviously, it is always hard to change the kind of main discourse around the topic.
Yeah.
And we also see it today, like in Denmark, they just proposed a reform that is to give like higher sentences for different crimes as well. So I
Mm.
think it's also just the political landscape and the kind of debate as a whole that makes these different narratives around it, I would say.
Has the debate changed in Denmark at all, over the last few years? Like, has 'cause you've seen more immigration in Europe, over like the last 10 years. Do you think it's changed the debate on punishment and gangs and sort of crime?
I think the debate, maybe not just on gangs, crimes, and punishment, but just as a whole, we see how, as a society, when we speak about things, we want there to be a hero and we want there to be a villain, and then we want somebody to be the ones that are going to be saved. And we see that in every kind of narrative about immigration, gangs, crime, just anything really that we speak about. We like this story of the villain, the hero, and all the innocent people that are going to be saved. So I feel like that's definitely a factor because we see that in immigration as well. Yeah. And I also read some research the other day pointing out that the kind of problems evolving around immigration, that things have actually changed for the better. So more people who've immigrated are now working or taking an education, but the opinion about immigrants and the fact that they don't have a job and they are undereducated and they don't speak the language and all those racial stigmatizing comments haven't changed. So Danish people as a society think they know a lot about immigration, but they actually don't.
Yeah.
And they're not willing to change their opinion. So you can give people straight facts, but they won't change their opinion. It
Mm.
will stay the same. And that's obviously something society has to deal with in order to maintain a well-functioning society. But it's a difficult question because there's no real answer to it.
Yeah, because I think it's such like once a topic becomes emotional, I think it becomes really hard to just like even change the opinions about it. Because as you said, like once some facts are delivered, even if they make complete sense, when it's an emotional opinion, like you just there's this feeling of like I don't want to change my answer or like the way I feel about it. This is the way I feel. Um, so that is quite a difficult one, and I think usually the best way, at least in my opinion, the best way is to sort of try and bring different groups together and have them talking. Because then once you are in person with someone, you can see like, oh, that's their point of view. They're actually not as bad as you might have thought they were, or they might break a lot of stereotypes that people would have had. And then I think once those initial stereotypes are broken and they have that feeling of, oh, maybe I wasn't right, then it sort of opens the door for allowing further change. So we are coming towards the end. I just want to finally ask you, like, what your hopes are for your future work. Like, what are you working as at the moment? Like, do you hope to work in the field? And so you're still doing your masters right now, aren't you? You're doing your thesis. So
Yeah, I'll finish in like a month.
what are your hopes when you leave? Do you know what you'd like to do?
Uh, that's a difficult question. I do want to work with young people and children, and I want to work with maybe like a more broader crime prevention. So, kind of as we spoke about earlier, ensuring those strong social bonds, being able to help children who need a bit of extra help, whether it's in school or so kind of really like maybe a consulting position or something like that, having to implement different programs in order to prevent crime in society.
Excellent. Well, good luck with all that, Astrid, and good luck with your thesis. And
Thank you.
thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. It was awesome.